A friend of mine outside Austin passed on a new Toyota Camry last month. Not because he couldn't swing the payment. He could. Not because he didn't like the car. He did. He walked out of the dealership after being quoted just under $42,000 for a loaded XSE hybrid. And 2 weeks later, he bought a 2003 Camry from a very careful older owner in a nearby town. Paid $6,800 for it. 2.4-liter 2AZ-FE, 4-speed automatic, real buttons on the dash, mechanical needles on the cluster, and not a single touchscreen anywhere in the cabin. Everyone he told thought he'd lost it. He explained it pretty simply. I did the math on 10 years of ownership on the new one, and I didn't like the answer. Didn't like it, detail by detail. In this video, 8 specific shifts in how new cars are engineered and sold that, over the last decade, changed what buying a car actually means. Not cars were better back then and now they're bad. Point by point, with numbers, with examples, with model names.
Represents the pinnacle of German engineering.
What changed, why it hits your wallet, and where an older car is actually the smarter buy. Plus, honestly, where going old is a mistake in the other direction, and I'll cover that at the end. Counting down from 8 to 1, ending on the least visible trap. Trap number 8. The touchscreen replaced your buttons. The first thing you notice inside a new car, a giant horizontal screen across the middle of the dash. Looks great. At first. Problem 1. Ergonomics. To turn on heated mirrors on a cold morning, you now have to swipe, find an icon, tap. 3 eye movements down, each one a fraction of a second off the road. Euro NCAP in 2026 formally added removal of physical controls for key functions to the list of factors that reduce a car's safety score. Not marketing, actual test protocol published on their site, which means even the industry has admitted a touchscreen for anything you use while driving is an ergonomic regression. Problem 2. Repair cost. A physical heated mirror switch 10 years ago was a $3 part at a salvage yard. A cracked touchscreen on a current VW Passat is $1,600 to $2,400 for the used donor unit, closer to $3,500 for a new one. On a new BMW 5 Series G30, the central display is $6,000 to $8,000 out the door, once you include the coding fee. On a Tesla, where a single screen replaces the entire dash cluster, you're looking at $2,500 to $4,000 for the module. And then you have to pay to unbind it from the previous VIN through the dealer software. Problem 3. Degradation over time. LCD and OLED panels lose brightness with use. By year 10, the point where an older car is just entering its stable and cheap phase, the screen on the newer car starts showing burn-in where static icons live. Kia Sportage 4th Gen has this documented already. Shadow of the climate control icon burnt into the matrix. A physical button after 10 years is the same button. Maybe the label wore off, but it still clicks. What to do? If you already own a car with a big screen, keep a soft microfiber in the glove box and never wipe the screen with your bare glove. Micro scratches on the anti-glare coating are the #1 reason these start pixelating around year 5 to 7. If you're shopping, pay attention to whether the trim you're looking at still has physical controls for climate, steering wheel audio, and mirror heat. They're getting rarer, but they exist. Trap number 7. Subscription paywalls on hardware you already own. In 2022, BMW tried to launch a subscription for heated seats in the UK, South Korea, and a couple of other markets. $18 a month for a function that was physically already in the car. heating element under the seat cover, switch, wiring harness, all installed at the factory. Activation was a software key. The backlash was loud enough that BMW walked it back publicly in 2024. But the model didn't die. It just moved. Mercedes has been charging around $1,200 a year on the EQS since 2024 for a software key that unlocks 20% more motor output. Hardware is on the car from the factory. Toyota through 2024 gated remote start on the key fob behind an annual subscription before pulling back under pressure from a U.S. class action. It's going deeper. Since 2026, a lot of the major OEMs contract the connected features, not to the car, but to the account, through your login. Sell the car used, and some functions automatically deactivate for the new owner, who has to resubscribe under their own name. You buy a lightly used 2025 Audi and discover that the adaptive high beam only works at the premium tier the previous owner was paying for, and you're not. A 2001 car, everything loaded into its ECU, is yours forever. Nobody can remotely deactivate your heated seats because there's no cell modem in the car through which anyone could reach it. There isn't one at all. What to do? Before buying anything new, look for the sections in the contract and the owner's manual labeled Connected Services, Subscription Services, In-Vehicle Payments, Connected Drive. Read what's actually behind a software key. If a function matters to you, price it into 10 years of ownership. Often, a cheaper trim with subscription paywalls is more expensive over the life of the car than the expensive one where everything is bought once. Trap number 6. Turbo downsizing and low-speed pre-ignition. Ford Fiesta with a 1.0-liter 3-cylinder EcoBoost. VW Tiguan on the 1.5 TSI. Kia Sportage on the 1.6 T-Base BMW. 3 Series with a 2.0-liter turbo. Over the last 15 years, automakers have collectively shrunk displacement and added turbos because U.S. and European fuel economy tests reward small displacement under light load. That's the paper number. Real world is different. First, LSPI. Low-speed pre-ignition, meaning combustion starting in the cylinder before the spark plug fires. Happens on direct injection engines running high specific output, which is exactly what a downsized turbo is. Mechanism. At low RPM under full load, conditions in the cylinder let the mixture auto-ignite before the plug fires. Detonation. The pressure spike can literally rip the piston off the connecting rod. GM's Ecotec LTG 2.0T from 2014 to 2017 saw this in customer engines and issued multiple service bulletins recommending a switch to oils with tighter calcium limits. Modern engines are protected by the APISP plus Dexos 1 Gen 3 specifications, but put the wrong oil in and the problem comes back. The calcium chemistry is worth a quick note because almost no owner has heard of it, and it's the actual mechanism. Calcium in the detergent additive pack, when it gets carried into a hot combustion chamber under load, becomes a catalyst for auto-ignition. Older energy-conserving oils with high calcium, 1,800 to 2,500 parts per million, worked fine on port injection, naturally aspirated engines, but essentially fed the LSPI problem on a downsized turbo direct injection engine. APISP and Dexos 1 Gen 3 tightened the calcium limit specifically for this reason. This is one of the rare cases where a new spec is actually solving a real customer failure mode, not just marketing. Second, thermal load. The 1.4 TSI in AVW puts out around 150 horsepower on 2.7 bar of boost. That's specific output territory that would have been racing engine numbers in 2010. A naturally aspirated 2.5 with the same 150 horsepower had a fraction of the thermal stress per cylinder, which is exactly why you see the pattern. Oil consumption at 250 grams per 1,000 miles by 60,000 miles, coked piston rings, warped exhaust valve seats. Third, repair math. A naturally aspirated 3.0-liter engine 10 years ago would routinely go 250,000 to 300,000 miles before any major work. A current 1.5-liter turbo often needs meaningful intervention around 100,000. And meaningful doesn't mean swap the rings. It means timing chain, tensioner, often the head, often the turbo. A Nissan Qashqai with the HR13 DDT gets you to a $3,500 to $6,000 total repair at high mileage. What to do? Turbo downsized engine. Oil only to the exact approval. Not 5W30 should be fine. Change interval, a couple thousand miles under manufacturer spec. So if they say 10,000, you do it at 8,500. Warm-up matters. 30 to 60 seconds of idle, even in summer. I covered why in another video. Fuel from stations that turn inventory quickly, not from a random truck stop, because low octane triggers LSPI instantly. Trap number 5, the CVT. Nissan X-Tronic. Jatco CVT-8 in the JF016E and JF017E variants. Toyota's K120 CVT in the Corolla starting around 2012. Most Subaru Linear-Tronic units. All of these work on one basic principle. A metal belt or chain transfers torque between two conical pulleys that expand and contract to change the ratio smoothly. On paper, ideal. No steps, no power interruption, best possible fuel economy. In practice, 3 systemic weak points. First, the belt or chain works on friction. Friction means heat. Heat breaks down transmission fluid. As the fluid degrades, it loses friction characteristics. The belt starts slipping, and the pulley cones score. On Nissans, it shows up as a shudder during acceleration. On Jatco 16 units, it shows up as slip on cold startup. The X-Tronic early failure class action was filed in the U.S. in 2019 and settled for $277 million in 2022. Nissan officially acknowledged the defect. Second, rebuild economics. A conventional 4- or 5-speed automatic on a 2003 Camry, the whole unit comes apart, gets rebuilt, and goes back together in almost any transmission shop. Rebuild runs $1,800 to $3,200 and gets you another 150,000 miles. A Jatco CVT can't be rebuilt in the same way. You basically swap the whole unit. Cost, $4,000 to $7,500, depending on the vehicle and whether a good used one is available. And there's no guarantee the replacement lasts longer than the first. Third, fluid change interval on many CVTs is listed in the manual as lifetime. Lifetime meaning for the life of the vehicle. The catch is that the manufacturer's definition of lifetime and yours don't match. To them, lifetime is 100,000 miles. To you, lifetime is 250,000 plus. Realistically, CVT fluid needs a change every 30,000 to 40,000 miles, regardless of what the manual says. What to do? Buying a car with a CVT. First, look up class action history and service bulletins by model year. Nissan X-Tronic through 2019 is a complicated story. Toyota K120 is markedly more reliable. Subaru Lineartronic depends heavily on which generation. Second, plan on changing the fluid every 30,000 to 40,000 miles, regardless of what the manual claims. Third, don't tow trailers. Don't crawl up long grades at low speed under full load. The CVT isn't built for that. Trap number 4, stop-start eating your starter. You're stopped at a red light in downtown Denver. The engine shuts off automatically. Light goes green, engine restarts. You didn't touch the key. Elegant, economical, EPA fuel economy number goes up around 7 to 9%. Problems in the hardware. A conventional starter from the 90s was designed for something like 50,000 lifetime starts, 30 starts a day, 300 days a year, over roughly 5 years of ownership. A start-stop car starter has to survive 300,000 to 400,000 cycles. The heavy-duty starter they put on those cars is spec'd for about 150,000 cycles. In heavy urban driving, that's 2 to 3 years of use. Second component, the battery. A conventional flooded lead-acid can't handle that many deep starting draws. A GM absorbed glass mat is required. Life expectancy on an AGM is 3 to 4 years. Replacement cost is $300 to $600 for a proper AGM in the LN3 or L5 size range, versus $150 to $200 for a conventional lead-acid. Third component, flywheel and crank. Even with a heavy-duty starter, the wear rate on the pinion and the ring gear is way higher than it used to be. Replacement of the ring gear means dropping the transmission, starting at around $900 in labor before you even get to parts. What to do? If your car has stop-start and you live somewhere with heavy stop-and-go, just turn it off every time you start the car. The A button with the slash through it. First press after startup disables it until next ignition cycle. Fuel economy in stop-and-go goes up maybe 2 to 3%, but you triple the life of the starter. Trap number 3, air suspension and the electronic parking brake. Two different systems, same underlying pattern. They replace something mechanical with something electromechanical. Air suspension on the Range Rover, Audi A6 and A8, Mercedes S-Class, BMW X5. That's a compressor in the trunk, 4 air struts, an electronic control module, ride height sensors at each axle, comfort on rough roads, outstanding. Life expectancy on the air springs, 8 to 10 years. A single strut on a BMW 5 Series is $700 to $1,000 for the part, plus $300 to $500 in labor. A compressor averages $900 to $1,400. Over 10 years of ownership, you're doing at least 1 full round, usually 2. That's $3,500 to $5,000 in extra suspension cost you wouldn't spend on the same car with coil springs. Electronic parking brake, a small motor and gear reducer on each rear caliper. Upside, gives you a cup holder where a lever used to be. Downside, the motor lives in road grime, salt, and winter chemistry. Life expectancy, 7 to 10 years. Replacement of a single motor, $400 to $800 for aftermarket, $700 to $1,200 for OE plus labor. A conventional, cable-actuated parking brake is adjustable, repairable, and lives the life of the car. What to do? If air suspension doesn't do anything critical for you, try to spec around it in trim selection. Not every model gives you the option, unfortunately. If you already have an electronic parking brake, avoid engaging it in below freezing weather for long-term parking, because if the pads freeze to the rotor, the motor may not be able to release them. Overnight in a cold snap, leave the car in park on flat ground or in first gear with the wheels turned to a curb on an incline. Trap number 2. Plastic where you used to see metal. Plastic intake manifold. Plastic water pump impeller. Plastic thermostat housing. Plastic tees and hoses in the cooling system. All standard on modern engines. Reason: weight savings for CO2 rules, cost savings for the OEM. Problem is, thermal cycling. Polymers get more brittle over years of going from -20 in a January driveway in Minneapolis to 250 degrees Fahrenheit under the hood in July in Phoenix. By year 7 or 8, a plastic thermostat housing on a BMW N20 cracks, and the engine loses all its coolant in a few minutes. The plastic intake manifold on the Ford EcoBoost 1.6 loses its seal at the gasket, gets a vacuum leak, and the O2 sensor throws the mixture. The plastic water pump impeller on the VWEA 888 Gen 2 breaks off. The engine overheats in 5 minutes. The metal equivalents on older engines: cast iron intake, brass impeller water pump, brass tees. Over 30 years, they may corrode. They don't shatter in the cold. What to do? On a car past year 6, check the plastic cooling parts at every service. Visual inspection with a flashlight. Look for coolant residue and streaks around suspect areas, and plan to swap plastic to metal aftermarket where those parts exist. On the BMW N20 specifically, there are aftermarket aluminum thermostat housings and aluminum water pump housings from European suppliers. They cost about twice what OE plastic does, but they live 3 to 4 times as long. Trap number 1. The data pipeline to your insurance underwriter. This is the biggest and most invisible of the 8, worth taking longer. In April 2024, the New York Times ran an investigation of General Motors selling detailed driving data through the OnStar telematics service to LexisNexis Risk Solutions. LexisNexis is a data aggregator that sells risk scores to insurance carriers. Hard braking, hard acceleration, speeding events, late-night driving. All of this was flowing from specific owners' cars to insurance, and those owners were discovering that their annual premiums had jumped 20 to 40% for reasons the carrier declined to specify. Class actions were filed in July 2024. GM ended the program after the reporting hit and stated they deleted the data that hadn't been sold yet. The important thing about the story isn't that it ended. It's that it exposed the model, not just at GM. Mozilla Foundation's Privacy Not Included report in 2023 documented similar setups at 25 manufacturers, including Toyota, Nissan, Ford, VW, Hyundai, Kia, Honda, and most premium brands. Ford was rated the worst on volume of data collected. Nissan was rated the worst on volume of data shared with third parties. What the car actually knows about you. Your routes, where you go, when you leave, where you park. Your driving style, how you accelerate, how you brake, how fast you take corners. Who else drives the car? Via individual seat profiles and settings, voice queries to the infotainment system, whatever comes over Bluetooth from your phone, contacts, some message previews, call history. On some vehicles, video from the driver attention camera. Where it goes, per the manufacturer's own privacy policies, partners, Insurance affiliates, marketing networks. What partner actually means in each case, the manufacturer isn't required to disclose in detail. In the U.S. legal frame, protection depends heavily on your state. California has the CCPA, which gives some direct control over deletion and sale of data. Most other states don't have equivalent laws, and vehicle telematics falls into a gray area. Technically, vehicle operating data, not personal data in the strictest sense. Legally, hard to contest. Since the LexisNexis story broke, insurance carriers have been quieter about telematics-based underwriting, but the data pipes haven't gone away. They've just moved. Progressive's Snapshot and State Farm's Drive Safe and Save are the obvious ones. Opt-in, where the customer knows the trade. The invisible version is the one that scared people in April 2024. The automaker sharing driving data with a data broker. The data broker selling risk scores to the carrier, and the carrier repricing the policy, with no communication back to the driver about why. That's what the GM class actions are about, not snapshot device, the pipeline the driver didn't know was on. A 2001 car doesn't send anything anywhere. It has no cell modem, no eSIM, no integrated GPS beacon. You get in, you drive. Nobody knows where you go except you and whoever's in the passenger seat. What to do? If you already own a newer car, go into the settings under Connected Services and turn off everything that can be turned off without losing basic function. Usually that's predictive maintenance, driving behavior analytics, and location history. Second, don't give the manufacturer's app access to contacts and media on your phone. It doesn't need them. Third, once a year, check if you're accidentally enrolled in a premium reduction program or similar. Sometimes these get checked as a default at signing, and they're just data collection under a different name. The golden era of engines. 1998 through 2005. This isn't nostalgia. It's a specific technological window. What happened in those 7 years? The industry finished rolling out multi-valve heads and electronic fuel injection on mainstream cars. But it had not yet moved to direct injection on mass models, hadn't started turbo downsizing across the board, hadn't installed CVTs in the compact segment, hadn't built cell modems into base trims. Materials were still conservative, cast iron in blocks, brass in cooling systems, metal in intake manifolds. Specific engines that earned this pantheon status. Toyota 1MZ-FE 3.0 V6 in the Camry and Highlander. Toyota 3S-FE and its variants. Honda F22 and F23. Nissan VQ35DE. Chrysler 4.7 Magnum. BMW M54 in the E46 and early E60. Mercedes M112 V6. All of these routinely see 250,000 to 400,000 miles before any major work when maintained sensibly. Just as important, the transmissions of that same era. Toyota A340 and its variants, ZF 5-speed, Aisin 4 and 5-speed automatics. They come apart, they rebuild. They live 150,000 to 250,000 miles between rebuilds. Electronics were already there, but simple. ABS, airbags, climate control, cruise, power windows. Everything you need. Diagnostics through the OBD2 port, standardized in the US in 1996 and worldwide by around 2001. A basic scanner is $30 online and tells you everything you need to know. One point that gets lost in the golden era conversation: safety was already miles ahead of what most people remember from earlier decades. The 2003 Camry has driver and passenger airbags, ABS, side impact beams in the doors, crumple zones, designed around modern-era offset crash protocols. It's not a 1984 car. Compared to what you'd walk into at a dealership today, sure, it lacks the active safety layer. But compared to what you'd have driven 10 years earlier, it's a huge step up. That's the point. The era got the passive safety, got the electronics, and hadn't yet added the parts that turn every problem into a $2,000 dealer diagnostic session. When buying an older car is the wrong call. I promised at the start I'd be honest about this. First, if you don't have a mechanic you trust, or your own hands and eyes to look under the car regularly, an older car will nickel and dime you. Not the big known repairs, the 10 small ones a month that you find out about because of a leak or a knock. A newer car for the first 3 to 5 years asks for basic services, and that's it. If that difference matters, price it into ownership cost. Second, safety. Even the best 2003 cars, tested against modern Euro NCAP or IIHS protocols, come out with 3 stars out of 5. Not because the metal was weaker, but because there are no side curtain airbags of the second generation, no lane keep assist, no automatic emergency braking. If you're driving kids on the interstate regularly, that should be in your calculation. Third, fuel economy. A naturally aspirated 3.5-liter V6 in city driving is 18 to 22 miles per gallon. A modern 1.5 turbo is 30 to 38. At 15,000 miles a year, that's $800 to $1,200 a year in gas. Over 10 years, up to $12,000. Significant. Fourth, insurance. Full coverage on an older car is often not worth it or not available. Liability only is cheaper, but you're carrying the depreciation risk on the car yourself. Do the math. Fifth, and most important, buying an older car is not a rejection of progress. It's a conscious pick of a specific point on the curve of ownership cost, reliability, privacy, comfort. The 2003 point on that curve often wins against the 2026 point. Sometimes it doesn't. Your call is to understand what you're actually buying and why. The friend outside Austin who took the 2003 Camry instead of the new one isn't an idealist. He sat down and did the math. $42,000 on the new one, plus $1,200 a year on active safety subscriptions, plus insurance underwritten with telematics data on his hard braking, or $6,800 on the old one, $35,000 freed up, and nobody knowing where he parks at night. He chose by the numbers. Comment below and tell me, if you had the budget for a new car right now, would you buy one, or would you go looking for something from the early 2000s? And if you're a mechanic, which shows up more often with weird electronic gremlins? Newer cars or older ones? I have a guess, but I'd rather hear the answer from someone with a lift. If this was useful, like, subscribe, notifications on. I put out a few of these a week. Tools, fuel, diagnostics, and honest DIY without the heroics. Thanks for watching to the end.